What's up, guys? Welcome down to the vault. Glad you guys made it in. This is a special episode of the vault because I have a special guest with me today. I have one of the pioneers in vaping, and he's one of the kings. I know a lot of you guys out there vape, and a lot of you guys that smoke weed like me, and you know I love to smoke weed or oil, whatever, just like I have here with me right now. But I have one of the pioneers, one of the guys who very first started making this kind of stuff, and he's going to talk to us about that. He's here with us right now. Welcome to Zetro's Toxic Vault, Mr. Rick Flaler. How you doing, brother?
Welcome. Nice to be here.
Good to have you. What do you think?
I love the place, man. I love it. I was petrified when I first came in, but I'm starting to relax a little bit.
It's that one spider that's on the wall that
exactly
just sits. Everybody, you know what? I have this thing. It's like, I don't fuck with the spider, and the spider don't fuck with me. So we kind of have that thing going on.
I don't have that relationship yet.
Yeah, well, it kind of gave you some eyes as you made it your way down the vault. Right. So anyway, like I was saying, you've been in this industry for a long time. I know it's just been probably the last maybe 2.5, 3 years tops where I knew about it, and I'm a total pothead. So tell us about how you got into it, how you started it, because it was illegal at one time. So it must have, the inception of that must have come to that. Tell us and tell all the people out there, who are watching this, how you got into it and how it started and kind of how the history of it came. Hey, have you got your Zetro's Toxic Vault t-shirt? Go to greyhavenmedia.net and get yours today. So tell us about how you got into it, how you started it, because it was illegal at one time. So it must have, the inception of that must have come to that. Tell us and tell all the people out there, who are watching this, how you got into it and how it started and kind of how the history of it came.
Yeah, it's come a long way in the 10 years since I first was interested in it. Exactly almost 10 years ago this month, in fact, a buddy of mine and I started an e-cig business, and that was absolutely brand new to the America at the time.
So it was just tobacco at that time.
Yeah, electronic cigarettes were brand new. They'd only been started trickling in late 2008. In early 2009, we started a business, and we decided that we were going to start doing some trade shows. And so we had a product in mind already. We already had a product developed, and we hit a trade show that was down at the LA Convention Center called the THC Expo, which was probably the first of its kind.
Really, even before the hemp shows that they have? Because I know San Francisco back, I living in the Bay Area, that they've had that. At the Cow Palace, they've had those hemp shows, and now you can go there.
Yeah, this was prior to that.
Really?
Yeah. This was way before that. And, in those days, that first show, there was no cannabis consumption at the time. It was mainly just glass makers and hardware guys and doctors. But anyways, we decided that, it would be a nice place to pitch our electronic cigarette products. And funny enough, it was quite a show because in the wing right next to us was the adult film industry convention at the time, so you had weed and porn going in at the same time, the same convention center.
Two of our favorite things in the world, right?
It was epic.
You're real, man.
It was epic. So it was obviously well attended. It was just tons and tons of people coming by our booth, and if I had to answer this question once, I had to answer it 1,000 times. Can you smoke weed out of these things? And at first, we'd say, nah, you can't do that. No, you can't do that. By the end of 3 days, I was, yes, you can. Of course you can, And I told my buddy, I said, at the end of the show, I said, I need to get back and figure out how we could make these work, because this is really what the future is going to be. So it took me nearly 2 years from that point to get a product actually onto the market. That was this product here.
Was there other oils from other companies?
No.
Was somebody even doing it? So this is actually the first thing you do it, because I remember in the late 70s, remember honey oil? And every once in a while it'd come in and everybody would lace their papers with it and then roll marijuana in a honey oil joint. And this is basically the same thing as that, is it not?
So basically what I would have to do in those days was I would have to acquire hash oil from various backyard BHO blasting guys. Very highly illegal at the time. I mean, if you were ever caught with any amount of it, you were going
felony,
down.
yeah,
You were going down.
Sure,
and there was
felony.
no
controlled substance.
There was no compassion for it back
hell
then.
no.
And nobody looked the other way back then. They
No.
were looking for it. So it was really, really, under the table. I had to be real careful. But that's exactly the oil that I was using. Tried to formulate it. The hardware at the time, 10 years ago, really wasn't up to being able to handle hash oil at all.
And why is that? What's the difference between nicotine and or a cigarette, e-cigarette compared to the oil? What's the difference?
Back in those days when electronic cigarettes first came out, they were basically a high-temperature cotton sponge with a copper inductor that was stuck through the middle of it. When you hit on it, it warmed up the inductor, warmed up the sponge, the vapor.
Oh, I see.
And that's how you got the vapor, right?
Okay, wow, interesting.
But if you were to ever, when you tried to put
something every day,
hash oil in that technology, it would harden up. You'd get a couple of hits, and you'd get an effect, and then the next day when you hit it again, you would get no effect. And so it was, there were days when you felt like eureka, I found it, and then
so with the coil burned out, or
the sponge soaked it all up. The solution separated, it hardened up. It just wasn't very good. But that in about 2010. Ironically, the company that I was purchasing, where I was in China, having made our hardware for, they came out with a tank unit, like an ampule, which is what you see today, which is what you have in your hand.
Right.
You can call that a tank, right?
That's what I refer
so
to.
So it eliminated all of the sponge and all that. And so when that happened, that was the game changer right there. Okay, so now all you had to do was be able to get some sort of formula that would keep it from separating. And you were free to go. And so at that point, that's when I developed the disposable, kept it along the same size as a regular cigarette, like our e-cigs were. And I was the first one on the market with a disposable in the country.
Now, I know you call that a Happy Jack. Has it always been called a Happy Jack?
It's always been called Happy Jack, yeah.
And how long has the Happy Jack been around, Rick?
It first came on the market in 2011.
So, wow, it's been around like 8 years now.
Yeah, it was out probably a year and a half, 2 years before any sort of cartridge came on the market.
How's the evolution of that working? I mean, from the beginning of the inception to now, what's the difference?
I've changed it a few times, made some, manufacturing improvements to make it speed it up a little bit. But it's the same shape, the same form factor. That hasn't changed. It works, and it's effective, and it's mainly a 50-hit weekender.
Right, it's got 50 hits. It's a weekender.
Yeah, it's a weekender unit, and get everybody in the group high to go see a concert, and then you're done with it and throw it away.
Well, I remember I took some. You got some, and I took some to Mexico. I took some, and because they don't know yet what our technology in California is so much different than everywhere else in the world. Even Holland, everybody's, oh my God, Dutch weed. Holland, they're not even really up on the tanks yet.
No.
This is a kind of a California thing,
right?
And Colorado and the places that it's actually gone recreational legal at. So I found that a lot of these places don't know them. So yeah, this is e-cigarette, man. So they've saved our asses.
Well,
now.
That was part of the other thing. Back in those days, you had to be very discreet, and you had to really hide the fact that of what it was. So by keeping it like an electronic cigarette, like a regular cigarette, all that. And not really having a window so much you could see it all. You could take this anywhere. You could take it into a restroom.
Sure.
Or something. A couple of hits, you're out of there. And it was very, very discreet. That was really the driving factor back then, was keeping it discreet.
Well, that's the whole obvious thing of it now.
Right.
I mean, if you want to drive with it and smoke, you know what I mean? If that's what you want to do,
right.
The vapor is better than hitting a pipe or hitting a joint. It doesn't linger. You know what I mean? And
that's true.
You're in the movie theaters, you know what I mean? You can on an airplane. All these places I have done this, and believe me.
Right.
And even though they say you can't, it's a vapor. You don't smell it. If anything, you smell the fruit flavor of it in the air. It creates no smoke. But I find that that's probably the most convenient thing about it, especially if I want to smoke, say, around somebody who's not so into weed, you know what I mean, or doesn't like the smell of weed, or even looks down on it for whatever reason, which I could give a shit less about. But my point is That looks like an e-cigarette. What's the difference from that being anything else that's sold on? And it smells like it too.
Right.
And I'm not trying to rain on anybody's parade or trample on anybody. You know what I mean? So to me, all of the above is the reason why I love it personally.
Well, when I got into this, like I said, almost 10 years ago, I knew that it was going to get big. I never realized actually it was going to get this big. And I remember, back in 2011 when I first had the product available and I was taking it to various shops in San Francisco and San Jose, dispensaries. San Jose at that time had over 80 dispensaries and they're down to like 16 today. But I would go into the dispensaries and try to introduce the buyers and the bud tenders to this product and say, you really need to carry this. They would look at me and shake their head. They'd go, get the hell out of here. This is going to ruin our flower business. And
what's the reaction now? It's probably 50-50?
No, but the thing was back then there were a few clubs that embraced it. They looked at it and said, wow, this is cool. I want to carry it. And they did really well with it, But it was sort of a tough business at the time because, I had a product anyways that was before its time in many ways. And it was highly illegal at that time too. So anyways, but it ended up working out. Now today, if you look at vaping and edibles compared to flower consumption, I believe this year will be the first year that vaping and edibles as a group surpasses flower.
Really? As far as consumption. Yeah, really?
As far as consumption. So
amazing.
It's actually,
I guess it's true because the newer millennial guys, the people that that totally like it, they smoke it. That's what they smoke. I mean, I've got kids and my kids are all potheads. That's just the way it is. Right. Want to get a personal message to your friends from me, Steve Zetro Souza? Go to cameo.com. Download the app, answer some questions, request me, and I could be sending you a personal message. I can get get a bigger hit.
Yeah.
I can suck in a bigger hit, and off this, I can only get so much of a hit.
Right. And the other thing too is that the vaporizing pen is just not reaching the temperatures that a flame does on flower, and so that's a big deal, Right. So I think a lot of the vaporization that occurs in vape pens, you're not getting the full amount. I mean, 80% THC on a vape pen, you would think that you would just be on your ass, but you're not necessarily. One of the interesting points I brought up earlier was back in 2013, 2014 even, the cartridges at that time were testing out at 18 to 23%, whatever it was. And people just thought they were the greatest thing, and they were getting plenty high on that, right? I mean, they were getting high. And if they weren't, this industry never would have gone anywhere. But they loved it. And then, as more and more competitors came in, they kept trying to raise the bar. Okay, well, they're only 25, ours is 30, and then ours is 32, ours is 40, and then all of a sudden within 2 years it raced up to 85%, let's say. It was about the top cartridge you can get today, potency-wise. And so, but what they sort of missed is the idea that not everybody needs an 85% cartridge. It's a little much for most people.
I do. I need a 295% cartridge, if you know me.
But the people that are really casual users, that the new generation of people that are vaping, discovering it for the first time with recreational exploding, that's too much for them, And so the sweet spot in my mind is probably like 65 to 70%. That's a really good ratio right there.
I think that's true because most people aren't necessarily stoners, what I mean?
They just
I'm old school and I'm a stoner. It's just the way it is.
I sort of equate it to the alcohol industry in a sense, in that the manufacturers of all the cartridges today are all trying to produce the most potent cartridge they can.
Right.
It would be sort of similar to if everybody in the alcohol industry, all they wanted to produce was 150 proof grain alcohol or what have you, and then everybody that went into a bar.
But I do like the 150 proof grain alcohol.
There's a place for it.
There's
a place for it, but if everybody went into a bar and all they did was order shots of tequila, and tried to get as high as they could, as fast
Well, they
as
do
they
in
could.
Mexico, so I mean, there are places in the world that do that.
But the people,
Where are the places where we can just go and smoke 115%? You know what
that's
I mean?
true. That's
I can do
true.
those places.
But the point is that there's way more people that go into a bar and order a gin and tonic or a vodka cran, or something that
Sure.
and just want to have a mixed drink and want to get there, but
Take the edge off. Just take the edge off.
And so that's sort of in the vaping industry. That's what I think a lot of the manufacturers have lost sight of, is that not everybody just wants to do pound shots of bourbon. They want to have a nice glass of wine.
Yeah, I don't drink alcohol, so
it's just
to me this is
an
and I know
analogy.
some people do, and that's great with I have no problem with anybody drinking booze. I have a great time. Everybody in Exodus, aside for Jack, drinks alcohol, and I have a great time with it, and I think that's awesome. I'm a pothead. I've always been a pothead. Since '76, I've been smoking weed. So
Yeah.
I just, it's something, I've never really ever just stopped because I just like it. I
love
like
it.
the way it feels.
Yeah.
I like it's good with everything. I went and saw Cheech and Chong a couple of weeks ago, and they were saying, how does it makes food better? It makes everything better. You know what I
right.
mean? So
That's
hats
right.
off to the Godfathers of pot, Cheech and Chong.
That's right.
But
right.
you also have a pen as well, don't you? You have the Nova.
Yeah, I've got that's battery. That drives. It's the engine that drives all the cartridges.
I'm using it right now.
Yeah, nice. That's one of the
Talk
other.
about it a little bit.
Well, the other part of the other the evolution of vaping as cartridge manufacturers started putting more and more potent oil in their cartridges, it required a shift in the battery technology as well, because now the oil is really hard. You've got to warm. It's got to get warm at some point to get into the atomizer to.
That's what I like
to vape.
about this pen.
Right, but so what happened is that the old conventional pens of 5 years ago, where the oil was wasn't very viscous.
It was more thin. It was
Yeah,
a
it's
lot
almost
more-
like water kind of a
The
thing.
viscosity wasn't as thick.
Right,
as well,
right. That battery technology didn't work anymore after a while, and so the batteries that came out later, and the one that you've got in your hand right now, they're able to have a variable voltage function. By pushing the button a couple of times, you can switch voltages, and you can actually select how hot the battery's running, in a sense, how much voltage is going through it. And on your thicker
which
rolls,
will make you draw more smoke if you're at the hottest level.
it will allow the pen, it will allow the battery to warm the harder liquid, higher viscosity liquid quicker, and keep up with the higher viscosity liquid. The worst thing it could happen is when you take a hit, and then you want to take another one a few seconds later, but the oil hasn't caught up to the atomizer yet, and then your
Right.
next hit's a dry hit,
Right.
and then you're kind of
Well, I have noticed that as
priming
well.
it,
Yes.
and that's not a good idea. So that's why the new batteries today have various features in them that allow you to kind of raise the voltage level up. So it every hit is about the same.
Yeah, this one does. When you turn this one on, you actually hit the button twice,
Right.
so that it'll run through a heating cycle, which it tells you you're not supposed to hit until it comes through the heating cycle, and then it'll shake whatever color that you're on. If
Right.
you're on the lowest, it'll go green. If you're on the middle, it's blue, and if you're on the hottest, it's red, and it'll tell you, and then it's basically letting you know the pen is ready for you to smoke. And I've found that I can hit this thing consistently,
Right.
one right after another, or pass it around,
Right.
and you're not waiting for the hit, or
Yeah.
wow, you got a better hit than me. It needs to fill up, or the whatever the heating element needs to recook.